Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Prime Minister and the whole House will join me in sending our deepest sympathies to the friends and family of the cadet who died at Sandhurst last week. I'm sure the MOD is supporting the family and fellow cadets at a difficult time, but I also hope they will be reviewing the mental health support they give to all members of the armed forces at all times. Mr. Speaker, we also mourn the loss of Gordon Banks and send our condolences to his friends and family and the entire football community. He was one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, 73 caps for England, including playing in every single game during the victorious 1966 World Cup campaign, which I remember with joy. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Sir David Napley for his work as Clerk to the House and wish him well in his retirement. He's been here even longer than I have and has always been a source of advice to all members, irrespective of their party, and I always admire his dry wit and humour whilst describing the proceedings of the House. I think we owe him a big debt of gratitude. Mr. Speaker, the government's handling of Brexit has been costly, shambolic and deliberately evasive. Nothing symbolises that more than the fiasco of seaborne freight. A company with no ships and no trading history. On the 8th of January, the Transport Secretary told the House, "We're confident the firm will deliver the service." What went wrong?
First of all, can I join the right honourable gentleman in the remarks he made about the cadet at Sandhurst? He referenced the issue of mental health. This is an important issue overall, but obviously an important issue in our armed forces as well. And I'd like to pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend, the member for Plymouth Moor View, for the work that he has done in relation to mental health in the armed forces. I'd also like to send my deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Gordon Banks. Like the right honourable gentleman, I'm old enough to remember the 1966 World Cup. Now, let's be honest in this House. I think that's important. But from being part of that team to I think something else that people remember, the astonishing Pelé save in 1970. He was regarded as one of the world's greatest goalkeepers. But I also know that he did a lot of community work in his local area as well. And I know members from all sides of the House would like to join me in paying tribute to him. As regards the freight capacity, the government let 3 contracts. 90% of that was let to DFDS and Brittany Ferries. Those contracts remain in place, and that capacity has been obtained. And due diligence was carried out on all of these contracts. And as the Secretary of State for Transport made clear in this House earlier this week, we will continue to ensure that we provide that capacity, which is important in a no-deal situation, and we will ensure the capacity is there.
Mr. Speaker, the Transport Secretary told the House that this decision to award a contract to seaborne freight had no cost to the taxpayer. This week, the National Audit Office found that £800,000 had been spent on external consultants to assess the bid. Will the Prime Minister use this opportunity to correct the record?
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, he's a bit late to the party on this, because I was asked this question yesterday in the statement, I think, from the SNP benches. So Labour following the SNP. Well, whatever next. Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that, of course, as I just said, when these contracts were all let, proper due diligence was carried out. That included third-party assessment of the companies that were bidding for the contracts. There would have been a cost attached to this process, regardless of who the contracts were entered into with.
Jeremy Corbyn! I'm really impressed that the Prime Minister can keep a straight face while she said due diligence was carried out. The Transport Secretary said its business and operational plans were assessed for the department by external advisers. On the basis of that advice to his own department, Seaborne was a start-up company with no ships, and the contract was high risk, is what he was told. Why then, if he was told it was high risk, did he proceed with the contract?
To the right honourable gentleman. What he appears to be suggesting is that the government should never look at start-up companies, should never look at the opportunities for new companies to be undertaking this here. But it is entirely right, that the government has ensured that the majority of these contracts went to established companies, and I think it's entirely right that a company of which due diligence had been carried out. It's no good saying it wasn't, because it was, and we will ensure that the ferry capacity is there. What we're doing, of course, in these contracts is ensuring that we are able to deal with the situation were we to enter into no deal. Now, the right honourable gentleman has said in the past that he didn't actually want any money being spent on no deal preparations. He's also said in the past that he doesn't want us to go into a no deal situation. That's fine, but if he doesn't want us to be in a no-deal situation, he's going to have to vote for the deal.
It appears that we have to be fair to those advisers, because they were instructed to restrict their due diligence to the face value of the presentation put to them by Seabourn Freight, a company that had no trading history, and look into the directors of Seabourn, some of whom it appears would not have passed a due diligence test. However, the Transport Secretary told the House this procurement was done properly in a way that conforms with government rules. But what a Freedom of Information request reveals is that the Secretary of State bypassed those rules, as the Procurement Assurance Board, a senior panel of experts and lawyers, were denied the chance to scrutinise the deal. So what action is the Prime Minister going to take over what appears to be a very clear breach of those rules?
The contract was awarded following commercial, technical and financial assurance at a level in line with the company's status as a new entrant to the market, carried out not only by senior DfT officials, but by third-party organisations with experience and expertise in this area. That includes Deloitte, Mott MacDonald and Slaughter and May. It was designed in recognition of the risks posed. No money was paid to the contractor. No money would be paid until services were delivered, and therefore the money has been paid to that contractor. But I say to the right honourable gentleman, he has stood here time and time again and said actually that we shouldn't be doing anything to prepare for no deal. It is entirely right and proper that this government is taking the action necessary to ensure that it's not our policy to have a no deal, it is our policy to get a deal. But should we be in that no deal situation, we need to ensure we have the capacity we need, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Could I bring the Prime Minister back to the question of Seabourn ferries? Eurotunnel has called this ferry contract procurement secretive and flawed exercise, and taxpayers now face a legal bill of nearly £1 million contesting that. The money goes up and up. The Secretary of State's decision to award the contract to Seabourn has increased the budget deficit of Thanet Council, the owners of Ramsgate Port, by nearly £2 million. When questioned on this by the member for South Thanet, the Transport Secretary refused to give a guarantee. Can the Prime Minister today give a cast-iron commitment to the people of Thanet and confirm they won't be picking up the bill for this failure of this contract?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the Department of Transport and other parts of government are in discussion with Thanet Council about the issue of this contract and the impact of this contract. But can I also just again remind the right honourable gentleman of why it is that the Department of Transport has taken these actions in relation to ferry capacity. It is in order to be able to ensure that in a no-deal situation we are able to guarantee that medicines will be brought into this country. Primarily, we're prioritising medicines being brought into this country. Again, that was a question I seem to remember being asked on more than one occasion yesterday by members of the SNP who had an interest in that. The right honourable gentleman doesn't seem to be interested in ensuring that we can, in a no-deal situation, provide the medicines that people in this country need. That's what we're doing. That's a sensible approach of a government that is taking this matter seriously.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Maybe the Prime Minister should follow the advice of the House and take no deal off the table and negotiate seriously with the European Union. And it cannot be right, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be right that a hard-pressed local council and local taxpayers are footing the bill for the incompetence of the Secretary of State for Transport and this government. The spectacular failure of this contract is a symptom, Mr. Speaker, of the utter shambles of this government and its no-deal preparations. The Transport Secretary ignored warnings about drones and airport security, gave a £1.4 billion contract to Carillion, despite warnings over their finances. He oversaw the disastrous new rail timetables last year, rail punctuality at a 13-year low and fares at a record high. That is some achievement. And now the Transport Secretary is in charge of a major and vital aspect of Brexit planning. How on earth, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister say that she has confidence in the Transport Secretary?
Let me tell the Right Honourable Gentleman what the Transport Secretary is delivering. The biggest rail investment programme since the Victorian era. Spending nearly £48 billion on improving our railways to deliver better journeys. 20% higher on average every year than under a Labour government. That's what the Transport Secretary is delivering. Commitment to transport in this country and commitment to transport across the whole of this country. But I notice that the Right Honourable Gentleman wanted to focus his questions in that way, rather than asking more general questions in relation to Brexit, because of course there are still a number of issues. There's still a number of issues on Brexit where we don't know his answers to the big questions. We don't know if he. It's no good Labour members burying their heads in their hands. We don't know whether their leader backs the second referendum. We don't know whether their leader backs the deal. We don't even know whether he backs Brexit. He prefers ambiguity and playing politics to acting in the national interest. People used to say he was a conviction politician. Not anymore.